6:02. Myself and Council Reynolds are in the committee, and also Council Delicio, who's out tonight. I've invited some guests here to talk about what we currently have in the city for programs, and then what potential impacts could be for the new business that we have before us. So with that being said, I'll invite Ken and Madeline McNeely to come forward to talk about their programs, or one at a time, whatever is going to work.
Thank you very much for having me here this evening. So to get us started on the programs that are currently offered to the veterans of the city of Attleboro, the state has a series of disabled veteran tax exemptions, and I've got information about that on the city's website, both under the assessors section. You can print these little brochures, and I'm working on getting that on the veterans side as well, per our meeting, Councilwoman. And so in there is just a brief overview of some of the tax exemptions that are offered. The short version of the story is that you have to be a Massachusetts resident in order to qualify for any of these series. You have to be occupying the property as your domicile on July 1st to start the fiscal year off for us. And in addition to that, the veteran must have lived in the state of Massachusetts for at least 6 months prior to entering the service. And usually we'll do that using the elections records. The elections office and the city clerk will both work together to make sure that veterans were residents of Massachusetts before joining the military. And if, like myself, that happens not to be the case, because when I joined the military, I lived in the state of Arizona, you have to have lived in Massachusetts for 5 consecutive years immediately prior to filing for the property tax exemption. And so that's just the basic criteria. After you clear that hurdle, you'll talk to myself or the assessor's office about the Clause 22 series of exemptions, and that starts out as a $400 tax exemption for veterans who are at least 10% service-connected disabled. There are also other criteria, such as awards for high valor, or if one receives a Purple Heart or a Congressional Medal of Honor, you can fall into different categories worth of that veteran's tax exemption. So it's worthwhile for a veteran who has any level of VA benefit to engage my office as to whether or not they're eligible for these real estate tax exemptions, because we can go through that and figure out which ones apply, which ones we might be able to apply to the VA to increase one's service-connected disability rating, to maybe potentially acquire a higher rating for the tax exemption as well. And in addition to that, surviving spouses of veterans who previously qualified for these typically will continue to qualify for the same tier of exemption that the veteran qualified for while alive, so long as the spouse does not remarry. And if those benefits for our veterans don't fully satisfy the need, the Veteran Services Department also has a volunteer program through the Senior Center, and I'm just going to tee this up and kind of let her talk about it a little bit more in depth. But the veterans of the city of Attleboro are beneficiaries of a volunteer program that's administered through the Council on Aging. And the Veteran Services Department receives about 10 of those volunteers. And what these volunteers do for us is they will drive the vehicles that were donated to the city of Attleboro and they'll pick up veterans at their homes. They'll take them to their VA hospital appointments, and I call it a concierge level service because they'll wait for them there at the hospital for them to be done with those medical appointments, and then these volunteers will drive them back and drop them off at their homes. So this is a critically important service to the veterans of the city of Attleboro, because I know of a handful of veterans that would not be able to access this medical care. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is that the way that this benefits residents of the city of Attleboro who are veterans is also that if they're veterans and they're seniors, they can work with the Council on Aging to be one of our volunteer drivers. And if they volunteer a minimum number of hours, they can qualify for an additional tax exemption in that way. So we're beneficiaries of the program that Madeline will, I'm sure, tell you all about, and we've got access to help for our veterans who need help with their real estate taxes.
Thank you. Have you noticed an increase in people reaching out for assistance in the last couple of years?
So the short answer is not really. Not more than a routine number, I would say. We've noticed an increase inquiries about how the tax burden of the school, which is slowly increasing, and what to do about it. So the inquiries that we do receive tend to start out along those lines with that sort of a conversation, but I would not characterize it as more folks coming to my office seeking assistance in that way. Part of that I attribute to the fact that we do a reasonably good job, in my opinion, of bringing this up for them. When somebody comes into my office, we'll do a screening, we'll interview them, what kind of assistance do you need, what kind do you qualify for, and if they indicate that they're homeowners, and I also know that they meet these criteria that I sort of outlined, we won't really even ask them. I'll just grab the green form and I'll hand walk them down to the assessor's office and I'll say, here's what we're doing here, and I'll explain how the program works that way. So it's more about being proactive and bringing the benefit to the veteran than demanding that, taking a passive role and asking them to come into us. That's how I handle it.
That's great, and it sounds like now if you visit the city website, this will link up so people at home can access this if they need to.
Yes, you can go directly to the assessor's tab where she's got information about all of the various tax exemptions, and then I'm working on linking that to the veterans page as well per our conversation earlier.
Right. Does anyone have any questions?
Pardon me, but
Please.
everything that all the information you just gave us, is this for senior veterans, disabled veterans, or both?
That's a great question because I did kind of muddy the waters there.
No, I just thought that maybe I missed it, so
Yeah.
I apologize if I make you repeat yourself.
The answer is that they are separate. Veterans who qualify for the Veteran Series tax exemptions that I started by talking about can be veterans of any age. The Senior Tax Credit Work-Off Program does have the age limit, and that's why it's administered by the Council on Aging. So if you want to do the volunteer element to reduce your taxes even further, then there is that age barrier.
And so the veterans part, that's not senior, is that a disabled veteran or just a veteran without being disabled?
It's called a Disabled Veteran Series
Okay.
because essentially the Clause 22 starts out at a 10% disability.
Okay.
Other types of criteria happen to be the loss of use of a hand or a limb or an eye or this sort of thing, and it goes all the way up and it talks about 100% service-connected disabled, and it tends to be focused on disabled veterans.
Okay.
But I don't exclude people, and I'll still go through the criteria and find out if they qualify.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I'd like to bring up about that is that the service-connected disability, the 10% is actually not a very high bar. And the reason that I say that is many jobs in the military are industrial in nature, and I'll explain this to veterans. And one of the most common service-connected disabilities that veterans apply for is for hearing loss, and a related one, which is a ringing in the ears. So if somebody is exposed to hazardous levels of noise, they'll have this tinnitus is what it's called, a ringing in the ears. And as soon as somebody brings it up, or I notice I'm having to repeat myself or speak up for a veteran, I ask them what their job was. And if it's infantry, well, guess what? Guns are loud. Or if it's artillery, well, guess what? Artillery is loud. Or if they were a fighter jet mechanic like I was, fighter jet engines are loud. And so I lean on what was your job in the military to get a service-connected disability for hearing loss or for the ringing in the ears. And that's the most common service-connected disability the veteran receives from the VA, and most typically that's in the 10 to 20% disability range.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
I appreciate being here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ken. You gave me a nice segue on several occasions. I am the director of the Council on Aging, Madeline McNeely. We have been running the Senior Tax Work-Off Abatement Program since 2001 at the Senior Center. It was adopted by the City Council in 2000. At the first occasion that I was hired here in 2001 to work with the program, there were currently 4 seniors working in that capacity in that program. And one of the obstacles that we found was that most placement in city departments was a deterrent. The concept of having to train another person from scratch or add another person to supervise or other issues were impacting the ability for us to get that number of seniors out and working in the community. So what we have tried to do throughout the time that we've been running this program is work on an individual basis with the seniors. So all seniors that apply for the program are interviewed by the Senior Tax Work-Off Abatement Coordinator, Sue Arugio. She then gets a better idea of their capacities, their interests, their capabilities, whether they have, as Ken mentioned, any health-related issues, maybe the ability to drive is a problem getting to a site, any issues at all. And what is it that they really want to do? What's their interest? And we try to make that match. And I think that has been one of the real successes of the program. To date, we have 120 seniors in the program. And it's a real challenge because those of you that have seen the figures, probably 82%, if not more, are 70 and older. And so some of the challenges that we are facing are illness, an unexpected illness. We've had people that have had heart attacks. We've had people that have had hip fractures, all sorts of unexpected events through the course of managing their time in the program. And so each year we do a look back to see what the issues are and how can we work with the departments to make it successful and to continue to make it thrive. And so we now do emergency contacts so that we have a form on file, as does the department head, so that if something happens, which has in the past, in lieu of trying to reach me, the department that's in charge of that particular person knows who the contact is immediately and can work on making sure that person is contacted and the senior is safe. So we have 14 city departments that are currently accepting and working with our seniors. Some of the departments that really are eager each year to take back our seniors are Ken. He mentioned that he really has dedicated drivers. And I will tell you that it's a real challenge for the drivers to go into Providence and Brockton, is it? And Boston. And so when we're vetting people, that's one of the questions that we do address. How do you feel about driving in traffic? And in most cases, the people that are doing it love it, and they feel very dedicated. The pools are another example. Dennis Walsh every year holds a meeting with a collective group of our seniors and is really looking for those seniors to work on the pools. And I think, I hate to say it, but I think he counts on them. They engage well with the children, and the children like to see the older people there. And the library is another. We have strived to work very diligently with getting seniors in the schools. That's more of a challenge because by the time the school year starts and they get themselves settled, it's October or November before we can start the dialogue about placing seniors there. But I happened to be in the grocery store picking up a prescription the other day, and this gentleman hollered out my name, and I honestly didn't know who it was. But he said to me, I'm in the tax program. He said, and I just wanted to tell you that I'm reading to the kindergarten students. And he said, after my hours are done, he said, I am still continuing to volunteer because I love them and they love me. So that's, and then I said to him, well, you're going to tell the next person about that so that you can bring a buddy on and, add to the schools and the participation in the schools. So it's a challenging program to run, but it's a really highly rewarding one. For those of you that are not familiar with how the program runs, this year we have a minimum wage of $12. So each year up to $15 an hour, that minimum wage changes. So this coming fiscal year, starting January 1st, our fiscal budget will be $13 an hour per senior. And that will then reduce the number of hours that they are required to work in the program. So this year it's currently 55 hours. Next year, again, January, will be 51. So with the added number of seniors that we anticipate coming on to the program, and I did want to add that my board, we had an ad hoc committee that worked very hard and put together this brochure, which I'm sure most of you have seen now, and it's out in several places. It's on websites as well. And in the senior tax work-off abatement program, we have a wait list of 70 people. So, and that program hasn't really even opened yet. Those individuals are given first priority. So the 120 participants that are currently in the program, any one of them can be bumped. If those 70 people on the wait list have the criteria, have the capabilities to be put into a position, they will be offered that position. And that was the agreement that we made a couple of years ago at the City Council, that when we did establish a wait list, which I want to say was about 2 to 3 years ago, that those people on that wait list would get the first opportunity to engage in the program the next fiscal year. And again, there are a lot of other programs that we do offer through the Senior Center. So when a person, a senior, does come in to apply for the Senior Tax Work-Off Abatement Program, we are always, looking and talking to that senior and offering them the opportunities that exist through the Senior Center. So it could be, are they interested in seeking eligibility for the SNAP or the Senior Supplemental Food Program? Are they in need of some of the other programs that we offer? And there are a host of programs that will assist people in need.
Thank you. So, did you say 51 hours?
Yes.
Okay. And then the same question that I asked Ken, have you noticed an increase in people reaching out, needing?
Oh, yes, most definitely. I think Ken mentioned it, and I'll repeat it. The debt exclusion has a lot of people that particularly concerned. I know that there was a small incremental tax increase. That was catalyst for several or more phone calls, and we expect that there'll be many more as the tax base increases.
And then for the Senior Tax Work-Off Program, every year they have to apply.
Absolutely. Every single year, they are seasonal employees for the purpose of the city. And so every year they are enrolled as a new seasonal worker for the city. And so there is it's not a complicated application, but there is an application, and it does have to be renewed and reevaluated every year. This particular year, because of the anticipated increase in the number of applicants, we are working with the personnel department to try to streamline some of that paperwork, and that was a recommendation that Barry and some of the other committee members have made, and we're working towards that so that some of the, the heavy-duty workload can be reduced.
And then the same thing, if you go to the website, it will link up to
That's correct.
Okay.
It's been on my website since April of last year. When we had our first committee meeting, it was discussed, and Bill Lennox put it on immediately.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, does everyone else want to step forward to tell us a little bit about the impacts that each program could potentially, some changes that could be made? The 3 programs that we're going to discuss now are increasing the senior work-off program, and then the exemption program, and the property tax deferral program.
Excuse me. Come on inside.
We should have got a bigger table. Let's do this with you.
We're a happy little group. It's okay. We're cozy. It's all family.
Thank you so much for coming in, and everyone kind of has the form. I was just hoping to go through each program and the potential impacts that it could have in the city and the budget if we made any of these changes. But the hope was is that, and I think Madeline and Ken did a great job of explaining that there are already programs that do exist. Maybe you could speak a little bit to that, Julie?
Sure, we offer exemptions to the blind, as Ken said, the disabled veterans. There's a senior exemption under Clause 41C, which is for seniors over 70 years old. There are income and asset limitations to that, so you have to qualify for that exemption. There's also, under Clause 41A, a senior deferral exemption, and that would allow to defer any amount of tax up to 50% of the value of your house. So you could defer every year if you wanted to, but you can never defer more than 50% of the value of the home. That also does have income criteria. You would have to meet that criteria and then again apply every year and defer every year. You would also have to enter into a tax deferral agreement with the city. It's basically a lien on the property. The tax gets deferred until the sale of the home or upon death. It gets repaid right now. It's set at 8%. So it would need to be repaid at 8%, and it basically kind of goes through a tax title process to recover that money. There also is under Clause 17, it's a surviving spouse, minor child with deceased parents, and also seniors over the age of 70. It's $175. It's the smallest exemption that we offer. There are also some asset limitations to that exemption. But those are basically it. The Clause 41C, Clause 22, disabled veterans, Clause 37A, blind, Clause 17, surviving spouse, and then the senior work-off.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to just interject? So, I think it's important for the rest of the committee and council to know that, Councilor Holmes has had a number of us meet for several different occasions to go over what's available. So part of today was to make sure that we reach out and let the public know of some of the different opportunities that there are for folks to come in and avail themselves of. Council on Aging is a great resource to touch base with them to find out if there's something that is available to you. The Veterans Office and the Assessor's Office, those are the three primary offices to take away, to reach out to find out. The deferral program that Julie was just referring to, that program has been on the books in the city of Attleboro since before my employment in 1996. That is something that's available. The income criteria is important. I believe there will be potentially a proposed change for the interest charge. Right now the interest is set at 8%, and I believe that's by statute, but it can be changed.
Right.
And there was a great deal of discussion amongst the committee and the counselor to say, what is the suggested interest rate, what is reasonable, and stuff like that. So I think some of the things that will come before you in your committees and in your deliberations, I think it's important for us as a collective group to let you know, we kind of hashed it out. Certainly we're not the be-all end-all, the council gets to decide that, but in the recommendations that we've come to consensus on, one of the greatest impacts is, how does this impact the budget? Is this something that will impact the overlay? Are you going to be potentially reducing, a service someplace else by doing whatever of these steps are? So I know under the senior work-off program, right now, the increase is from 120 participants to 150. That 30 individual participant increase has been discussed at length with budget and admin, with the people who need to administer the program, with what would the impact be and how can that best be served for the residents. We also discussed things like income. Should there be a recommendation for criteria of limitations and that kind of stuff? If we didn't put it on the grid through the counselor, I believe it was because the general consensus was we think for a multitude of other reasons it might not benefit the program. So certainly if you have questions in that regard, but that's why some of these recommendations are the way they are, and some of them are potentially to change them. So under the 41C senior exemptions, there was original, is it appropriate for this time?
Yes.
Yeah, so, okay, so the age was originally to reduce it to, from 70 to 65. After looking at the census data for the city and having multiple discussions, the concern on our part was, how big of a leap are you taking in order to fund that? So the recommendation of the committee was to keep it at 70, which would have to be a proposed change to what's already before the council. But we also discussed the impact of maybe going from $600 to $700. Because according to the census data, the drop in the age would open the potential number of participants up by as many as 1,267. So 1,267 times the $600 is a lot more than just the number of active participants going up by 100. So we looked at this as a group to say, what's the overall impact, not only to the bottom line, but to the administration of the program. The tax deferral program has to be administered. It has to be administered by people in the assessor's office, people in the collector's office take part in that. My office, the accounting office takes part in that. The treasurer's office takes part in that. So all of these things were kind of hashed out and discussed. We're certainly here and able to answer any questions for you, but I just want you to know that we've really kind of gone through the grid, talked about this is the first year of maybe implementation of some of these things. It's not the last year. You might say, let's revisit this next year. That was discussed for other potential programs. What can we do in the future? And the rollout of some of these programs will coincide with the 2021 debt exclusion, which is projected to be the bigger impact to the citizens here in the city of Attleboro. So I think that it's just important for some framework to let all of you know that we have had those discussions, and I believe what the counselor brings forward to you will be sort of as a result of all of those discussions. Barry, I think, is going to talk about rubbish, right? That piece and the impact to the budget. I do want you to know, because this does come up and did come up in our discussions, like the 41A property tax deferral, because it's deferred and there's an equal deferral, that does not impact the certification of free cash. Like property, real estate, and personal property stuff is kind of taken out of the calculation as the Department of Revenue looks at that. So it absolutely impacts your budget. Most of these things are not going to actually impact your certifications, okay, of free cash. So that's, on one hand, it's good, but on the other hand, you need to consider the budget impact.
Budget impact. Mainly, the concern I have, and we, as Deb said, we kind of hashed it out amongst us as to what we think the budget can absorb, is the overlay. And if you remember from the budget hearings, the overlay is in your budget books, I think on the third page, and it's called the overlay for abatements. That's the amount that we have to raise as we balance the budget. This year, FY20 was $800,000. Going back in history, just to give you a reference point, in 2011, the overlay was $620,000, so now it's $800,000. We don't know what it's going to be for FY21, but that's how much it has jumped up. So when we talk about increasing the number of senior work-off members for that program, or we talk about the number of 41C participants, those hit the overlay. 41C is a reimbursement program, but I don't think we get much, if anything, from the state as far as reimbursements for that. So for the most part, these are hitting the overlay. So amongst all of us, we talked about a reasonable, balanced approach to increasing the program, increasing the aid to seniors, but also take into consideration the budgetary impact. And we think we've come up with a pretty good balanced solution for FY21. Deb mentioned this, there's another benefit to the seniors. So if the council was inclined to add $100 to the 41C, making the exemption $700, you would have to change one of your ordinances, 7-8.6. That is the exemption amount for the rubbish program. But the problem with that, if you do raise it to $700, it references $600 in the ordinance. So my suggestion would be you change the ordinance to reflect what the 41C exemption is, so that you don't have to keep changing the ordinance every time you change the 41C exemption. So that would be my practical suggestion for that. And that's a program that's run through the solid waste program. It's good for seniors, of course, and I think that through the adding of all these programs to the treasurer's website, to the collector's website, to the assessor's website, the veterans' website. We're gonna try to get as much of this information out to the seniors as possible. And certainly the brochures that the assessors puts out and the Council on Aging puts out are very helpful as well. So now begins the push to make sure that all of our seniors out there understand what benefits are available to them, as Deb said, as we enter this kind of a peak season of the debt exclusion in a couple of years.
Thank you. One quick thing. Will you just talk about the potential start date? I know that with the work-off program, it's different than the other two. If we make the change, there's some sort of, it would start in January, but then it wouldn't technically.
So, yeah, I'm sorry. Just so to clarify, the work-off program, you work a prescribed number of hours. Madeline said beginning January, it would be 51 hours based on the new minimum wage. So what happens during the calendar year of 20, beginning January 1st, 2020. I don't even know what year it is because I'm fiscal year. So you start there, and the benefit will be on your fiscal 2021 tax bill for the hours worked next year. So individuals that are presently working in the program, say today, they'll realize that abatement, exemption, however you want to refer to it, on their final tax bill for the current fiscal year. So there's a slight lag in it's not like you get a paycheck, it's actually a benefit against your tax bill. So the folks that are able to enroll in that program, they would start working in the program as of January 1st, 2020. They'd work throughout calendar 2020 and would realize that benefit on their 2021 tax bill. So the program, the increase in the participants for that particular program, I think, if I remember our discussions correctly, that's really the thing you want to get done as quickly as possible in the fall, so you can have the additional 30 participants in the program so that folks would benefit from that in next year. It is a rolling program in that if they didn't have everybody up and running on the first, they'd still allow people in throughout the year. They'd have the matches that Madeline spoke about and that kind of stuff. You do get essentially a paycheck that's a zero paycheck. You get the credit on your tax bill. You would receive a W-2 for federal purposes. For state purposes, it's non-taxable income, but for purposes of federal, we have to issue a W-2. It's on payroll. Yeah, so we issue the W-2 for that.
Okay.
So that all works through the process. And one of the reasons the assessor's office is involved for multiple pieces is they obviously issue the abatement onto the tax bill. That has to work in the collector's office for the tax bills to get issued. But the other thing is verification of ownership of the property. You have to be, for the senior tax abatement program, the work-off program, you have to be an owner of record of the property, or it has to be in a trust. There are limitations and criteria that's worked out through the application process. One of the things I took away through all the committee meetings is and I've worked here a long time. I'm not a senior, but there's programs out there that are available to folks, so it's a really good way to kind of educate everybody to say, hey, this is out there, 41C or the 41A and that kind of stuff. If you have questions, I would encourage you to reach out as a member of the community to the Council on Aging, to the Assessor's Office, to look at the website, to see what you may be eligible for. You might be eligible for a circuit breaker, which has nothing to do with what we can do for you, but it might have to do with what you can get on your tax forms and that kind of stuff. So there are some things out there that are available to folks and they just aren't aware of it, so I thought.
Yes.
And so, excuse me, generally speaking, the qualification date for an exemption through our office is July 1st. So right now, we're still accepting applications for exemptions for fiscal year 2020. People would need to have ownership, income, and age status as of July 1st for fiscal year 2020. We can accept those applications right through until next April. And then after that, beginning the next July 1st is when we'll start enrolling for fiscal year 2021. So our qualification date is July 1st. Madeline's program, it would really behoove her if this got passed prior to January 1st, so she knows how many participants she's going to qualify and get into her program, right?
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead. Did you have
You mentioned the overlay account was $800,000 for fiscal year 20.
Correct.
Do you know what it was for fiscal year 19?
750.
750. And how much of that went? Do you know roughly how much of that went to these exemption programs?
So for the senior work-off program, it's probably about $72,000. That would be the 120 participants times the $600.
The stuff on this sheet here.
Yes.
70,000 for the 41C and 70,000 for the senior work-off.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in overall, the total amount for these programs and the veterans programs was 294,000, right?
Right, but again, some of them are reimbursed by the state, so I factor in the senior work-off program, the 41C. So if you add 30 participants to the senior work-off program, that's another $18,000 to the overlay, and then the 41C is the extra $100 times the number of participants, which I think is about 125-ish, somewhere in that area.
Okay. So we're not talking about, I mean, even if we doubled it, that would be an extra 140,000.
Right, but again, you know, when just
Which
an extra
we're not
140
talking about doubling it, but that's
Right.
yeah.
So,
that's,
but we have to find that money somewhere else.
of course, yep.
And that's on top of the additional hours that we added to Madeline's staff to help handle some of this additional. So it's really a holistic view of how we can help these seniors, both from increased staff hours to overlay, and both of those obviously impact the budget.
So,
Sorry. Thank you.
so, the overlay for fiscal 19 ended up, it started at 750. It was, the final number was 723 and change.
Okay, thank you.
You're gonna start at 800 this year, that's the number that was in the budget, but that could go up or down a little bit because as a function of the recap, that's the number that the computer software system shifts slightly, just so that people don't think that that number doesn't move. I think the other thing that I don't remember if any of us shared with you, you may be eligible for more than one program. So you could conceivably be eligible for the senior exemption under 41C. And you could participate in and work and do the senior work-off program and get that benefit as well that you've worked for. And you could choose, after you've received your exemptions, that you could then say, and if you met the financial criteria for all of these things, you could then defer your property tax as well. So, not that that's necessarily the ideal, I just want you to know that these things aren't necessarily standalone. And then there was one more thing about the abatement, but I don't remember what I was gonna say. Sorry.
So, thank you very much. As you were speaking earlier, that you've vetted all sorts of different options. One of the things actually that I brought it to Councilor Holmes' attention a little earlier, a local community has a senior tax relief fund where money could be applied to that fund to be able to balance. People could make donations. If there's surplus somewhere, we can make an appropriation, things like that. Did you have any discussions with regards to that, and what was the result of that discussion?
We had some early discussions about multiple different programs. I think the goal for us today was to try to get out and educate people on what's truly available today that they can take advantage of. So, for example, we've also had discussions about a separate veterans program that may be available. But there was early conversations, and I'm not sure if it was exactly that same program, but there were some early programs like that we talked about and said we really wanted to focus on what we could conceivably administer that, or things that we have that we don't think people really knew about. Because the deferral program, for example, I think in the entire time that I've worked for the city of Attleboro, there's only been 5 properties, but there have been 5 properties in that program. But a lot of folks are relatively new to the city administratively and stuff and didn't even know that that was potentially something that's out there. You have to also be able to manage the programs. Do you know if that particular program was local acceptance?
I believe that it was. I can get more information with regards to it. It's taking place in Norwood, where they set up a special senior tax relief fund that different entities could either apply funding there. If there was a surplus from a project, it could be applied there, or a different thing, within, obviously within the parameters that they were able to do things. But I just didn't know if that was part of a conversation that you had, and if you vetted that at all.
Do you think
This
that
was
was one of the
something-
early ones?
This was
That
something
one of
that
the
early
ones.
on,
It was,
Council
yeah,
Corbis and
early on.
Councilor Hall did introduce this, and we talked about, I think it was a surrounding community had that, and then we reached out to their assessor, and they felt like it seemed like it was challenging to manage, and they didn't get anything, but I think it's worth
Yeah.
I was just curious if there was.
Was
Thank
it
you.
CCOMP did that too?
CCOMP.
CCOMP, yeah,
Yeah.
we had reached
Yeah.
out to CCOMP, I think.
Norwood has implemented it too, so.
I was just gonna add that I talked to the assessor in Seekonk, about this when this originally came in, cause it is business in, before the committee, but I think that sort of phase 2 of the committee's work, because we wanna get, what we know we can do, quickly making some changes, but, and really study that impact while analyzing the impact of any additional changes to what we do now, and then maybe adding, what this fund could or should look like sort of as phase 2, and sort of the rules for how it gets dispersed and what the criteria might be and those kinds of things. I sort of, from my perspective, I see that as the next phase of this special committee's work.
And that was basically the thought. Let's do what we can get done and work from there.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you. So what I got from when you first started speaking, Deb, everything we see here before us is what this whole committee worked on and what you feel would be sustainable to apply these changes.
Yep, and I just wanna make sure that we have the same thing. So on the senior tax work-off program, it was to go from 120 to 150. We presently don't have a maximum income. That was something that I think was going to be discussed, but from our perspective, it wasn't something that we would put forth to you. I think there were a number of considerations and concerns that went into that. Like what you have on a tax bill might not really, on your taxes that are something that's evaluated, may not actually reflect your current circumstance if you're a senior that had a catastrophic illness or that kind of stuff. So maximum income and asset things, we're recommending no change there, just the number of increase in participants. Under the 41C senior exemptions, as I understand it, what's presently before the council was a reduction in age from 70 to 65. The committee, as we would recommend that you keep it at age 70 because of the census data that we were able to pull together, and we felt as though if this increase from $600 to $700 didn't get you there, along with the potential increase for the maximum assets that could be changed slightly. There was some changes in the yellow. Those we would recommend those. And then we would recommend a reduction in the interest on the deferred taxes to accrue instead of at 8% to a lower interest rate. We settled at 2.5%. Again, it's open to great debate, but for multitudes of reasons we came up with that. And then the maximum income, the present income is at 20. We would recommend that the income would follow the circuit breaker tax credit. So there are some things that would be presented for new change. I don't think 41A has actually been presented for those changes. I think there's been some other types of discussions around that. But those were the things that we felt as though the overlay could potentially support. The administration for 30 new participants from Madeline with the additional clerical staff that she got over the course of the last year and stuff. We have had multiple discussions about how we can get other departments potentially to engage so that there's other slots available. We're gonna have meetings in that regard. I am probably gonna have a fall meeting with the department heads. So Madeline will have an opportunity to talk about that.
So on the 41C, I know you said that the group recommends keeping it at 70. What about the other two that are in yellow? Are you recommending those proposed changes, or like the maximum assets and the tax relief? You're recommending we go to 700 as opposed to 6, and then did you all agree on the assets as well? Okay, so it's just the age that you felt we should stay at 70.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? One thing I would add is the deferral program, I think, is very desirable from a city standpoint because we do get the funds back. And the other option is that people can defer 1 year and then decide the next year that they don't want, right? Isn't there, okay.
Yeah,
So-
you can, and you don't have to defer your entire tax bill. If you wanna defer half of it for that year, you can choose that amount.
And historically, when we had somebody participating in that particular program previously, that individual's family became involved and did come in and make payments. One of the benefits to that family was it wasn't accruing interest at the rate a tax taking would. It was at 8%. So the family was able to help manage the finances a little bit better in their own household and that kind of stuff, but they expressed that it was a better option for them, that it was there. That particular family did not defer every year. They had selective deferral of only a couple of years, continued to pay taxes, and ultimately that was, those properties were all paid off. The city did receive all of its funds.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other last minute comments from anyone? Okay. I will move to adjourn. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.
I don't know if she would prefer to recess. Because maybe.
You're not gonna vote this tonight, no. Right.
Were you gonna talk speed and stuff later?
This is the special plan.
Oh, that's right, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Total brain drain this time.
Yeah, and we'll have to do, or introduce this as new business.
Yes, you meant
The other two that you did.
Like you said, maybe follow whatever this is, follow the city of so that way we're not changing.
Right, right, and then that, some of these are already in here, so you already have this from 6 to 7 in here.
And I think I have.
You did, you did. I thought it said
if he's that,
If he watched, like, why didn't he go running outside? I don't know.
Not everybody's supposed
oh
to
boy, what happened?
they may be better. They don't like it. You're supposed to be their friend, you're supposed to support each other. Just saying. No, I hear you, I hear you.
from the Department of Fire Safety for the purchase of a gear extractor and drying cabinet at the South Attleboro Fire Station. Excuse me. The grant money must be expended no later than June 30th, 2020, and this council approves expending said funds in any future grant amendments. No matching funds are required.
Thank you. Second.
We talked about this last week, Lisa. I had talked to the police chief the day of the 9/11 ceremony, fire chief, excuse me, and he said he was working on it and it was in progress. We come in last Tuesday night and we had, at that point, received it. So I would assume that it's been ordered already. Or will be ordered once we give them permission to spend the money. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Move to adjourn at 7:04.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.
I call ordinance election legislative matter committee to order at 7:04. Committee members, myself, Council Waterman, and Council Jackson. I have one motion this evening. From the docket of November 6, 2018, I entertain a motion to approve the addition of 10-4, Section 18 of the revised ordinance of the City of Attleboro as it pertains to the ordinance adding permanent speed humps, speed cushions. 10-14.18, permanent speed humps, speed cushions. Definition: speed humps / cushions are traffic calming measures involving the profile and surface of the street and are specifically appropriate for minor collectors and local roads. B, speed humps and cushions and elevated segments of street are intended to let vehicles operating at intended speed of 15 miles to pass upon them with little or no discomfort to the driver or vehicles and are effective measures for controlling speeds. Conditions: speed humps and cushions are restricted to the residential secondary streets that have been identified as popular alternate or cut-through routes to avoid traffic delays that are posted. Speed limits are 30 miles or less. Speed humps cushions may never be installed on primary or through roadways. Speed humps and cushions must be installed using accepted proper signage in advance of the location. Speed limits shall be posted at 15 miles crossing speed. Placement: the placement of speed humps cushions will be determined and recommended by the mayor by first making a recommendation to the municipal council, which will then refer the matter to Traffic Study Commission. Upon study and recommendation from the Traffic Study Commission, the municipal council will refer the matter to the committee for consideration. Residents on specific residential secondary streets will be notified in 1 week prior to the implementation of the measure by the mayor's office. Effective date of this ordinance shall become effective immediately upon satisfaction of the requirements, Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 18.
Second.
Thank you. I had submitted something to the city solicitor, and what I would like to move forward with is what I submitted to the city solicitor. The major difference being that this includes municipal facilities and 500 feet beyond a municipal facility or complex, and not to any other area besides that. So it's limiting what the request is here. As we saw from the public hearing, there was only one individual, Jack Jacoby, that spoke in favor of this, and it was for the high school project, and we had one individual that spoke opposed to this. The other thing is that when something like this is introduced, as the chair, I'm feeling like this was not, it wasn't completely done the way that I feel like it should be done. Usually there's an engineer, a traffic engineer that would come into a community, and potentially a study would be done to determine if our city does need to have permanent speed humps. I appreciate the administration showing us what the policy would look like, and I appreciate the police chief coming down and explaining that the temporary ones do seem to be effective for speed. But with that being said, I don't feel like we should move forward with this. I'd open it to my committee to see if there's any other comments or anyone else.
ahead, Kate.
Counselor Jackson?
I haven't had a chance to read this over yet today.
Okay.
So I'll save my comments for next week once I review the letters that we have gotten from the chief of police, the mayor, and where we started.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
thank you.
I feel very similar. I just received this evening.
You didn't just receive this evening, but
Huh?
yes, I just printed it for you this evening. This was given to everybody over a week ago. A couple
Via
weeks ago.
email?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, I read it when it came via email on, actually, forget what date it came, but it's been probably a good 5 days anyway. And I'm in agreement with, Councilor Holmes on this, that, if we were going to do more permanent things, that we should have someone come in and, determine whether it's needed, an engineer. That's what the other cities and towns do. I feel that it would be more appropriate. So I'm comfortable with the changes that you have made in your committee, and I would vote to agree with these.
Thank you.
So, just procedurally, I think what you have before us is what was before this honorable body through the public hearing. I think what you submitted via email is the changes and then the approval to form and by the city solicitor. So are you looking to vote out what out of this committee tonight, what was voted, and then make these amendments in red on before the full council after everyone has the time to digest this, or what? Which I'm fine with that, but I just procedurally I want to make sure I understand, because you didn't suggest any of these amendments.
I know, I didn't make an amendment. I think that my committee seems like they do want a little bit more time, so I'm open to that. But I think that I would want to make these changes in committee and then move it out to the full council is what I was thinking.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your work on this. As we're all aware, it was referred to the Traffic Study Commission, and we batted this around, and then Mr. Jacoby came in and submitted it. When I read this, when I received this via email last week, I was thrilled to pieces. I think that this is a good piece of legislation. What initially came down was like maybe the framework for it, but this is like actual legislative language that I think addresses the specific concern as it pertains to the Attleboro High School construction build, which is what precipitated all of this coming in front of us to begin with. Secondly, I would suggest instead of referring to it as permanent speed humps / speed cushions, that we would change that language to traffic I can send that to you in an email, and it can be presented as an amendment for next week potentially. The traffic, instead of calling it a traffic calming device, and just updating the definition of that and changing it to traffic calming device, because each individual road moving forward could require, upon the study and recommendation of an engineer, it could be a speed hump, it could be a cushion, it could be a table, it could be any of those things. And instead of trying to it just broadens the definition a little bit better, so that the implementation is a little easier as we go through the process. So would you like me to just I can make those changes in this and send it to you?
Sure,
That's okay.
Yes,
All right.
I'm very open to that.
Okay.
I think maybe I'm not getting my point across, but usually, like for instance in Framingham, the Institute of Transportation and Engineers came to their community. They do an assessment. This isn't just something that, the way that this is coming about is a little bit confusing to me, because they would then guide us and tell us there's so many specifics. How many houses are on the street? What's the speed limit of the street? How many people travel the street each day? It's not just about showing us the policy and then expecting us to say, yes, I'm comfortable with this. There's a process, and I feel like that step is missing. I understand that many people are getting calls about speeding. I'm not sure if this is the answer. I do know that we do need it for the high school project, but I'm not comfortable saying, let's just pass it and then see what happens. I think we need to just be thoughtful and maybe take this step to get the high school project going, and then if somebody else would like to introduce or to potentially have a study that they could guide us and tell us. A lot of these things too, even talking to Vice President Perica about this, they come in fads. Like, a lot of the places that wanted these 5 years ago are begging them to please get rid of this. So I don't want us to kind of just move forward with something and then decide this wasn't really the right avenue for our community. And that's just how I'm feeling about it.
Mr. Cool.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Me?
Yes.
So with, just a question about the Framingham one, did they, was it a particular area that they wanted speed humps, permanent speed humps, and then they went and studied it, or did they come in, like Framingham said, hey, we're having a major issue with speeding around the entire city, can you come do this? Is that how it went, or was it a particular area?
I believe that they were trying to target speeding in certain areas, and so they brought in the Institute, it was Mass DOT and the Institute of Transportation Engineers to review what they felt like would work for their community. Like I said, it's so specific. It's how long is the street, the speed of this. These are things that that's what they do, that their whole job. It's not as easy as we may think of just kind of throwing up something and saying, yep, I solved a problem. It's, and I'm just concerned that if we do move forward making permanent speed humps, that it wouldn't be processing it the right way for our community.
Well, if we did do, hypothetically, if we pass this as is, say, I would assume that if, it was May Street or whatever street, any street, that we would do, wouldn't we do a study anyway, or, like, I'm just wondering, you know what I mean, like.
I get what you're saying.
Like, it refers to Vice President Paprika's.
Usually they kind of tell us what the community could benefit from, and then it would be before us to kind of do that. And that's why I'm saying I feel like we're at step 10 when we really need to be at step 1, 2, or 3, where we're feeling like there's increased traffic areas that need to be addressed. And so that's my thoughts on.
Okay, thank you.
So I think those of us that were on the council at the time, when the temporary came forward, that in and of itself was a lot of discussion. And so I don't think that there's anything wrong with a step in between. And we were going to evaluate how effective the temporary ones were. They've been 2 places to my knowledge in the city, and it's been in the last probably year that they've been placed. So maybe 18 months they've been placed. So I think it might be a big jump from temporaries to permanents, and this is another opportunity for us to evaluate the efficacy of them in a highly traveled area if we limit it to municipal buildings. And that area was fully studied with full traffic count, speeds, the whole thing, as part of what they were going to do to calm the traffic once they opened the traffic. Once they opened Rathbun Willard Drive back up. And it wasn't just humps, bumps, and lumps. It was the calming device circle and all of the work that's going on there today. So I think, from my perspective, this is a reasonable step. I don't think it's necessarily where it ends, but I think it's reasonable to get us both the temporary on file so we can continue to use those when we want to or need to, and then some permanent ones in the city permanent beyond the one we already have downtown. There's one there. We've graded the pavement over the years, but that was intended to be a hump, bump, a lump, whatever you want to call it, at the Chinese food place over here. Mm-hmm. That sidewalk was built that way. And to bring the sidewalk back down, you got to go all the way down the road, and so they just made it better with the pavement that they could and brought it up to a different thickness. So I think this makes sense to me as a reasonable next step, and I know that the reason for bringing it before us was because they said they were going to do it as part of the high school project, and then realized that they needed to make an ordinance change. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So. Does my committee want me to hold it, or do you want me to vote this out and talk about it? What are your thoughts?
I would suggest, can we bring this out again next week?
Okay, so you want to hold off. What do you think, Councilor?
I'm fine with bringing it out of committee. I really am.
Okay. So I think I'll bring it out of committee. I'm going to update some of the language. Instead of saying speed humps and cushions, I would also be saying traffic calming measures, and I can add that up. The other thing is that I want to highlight is one of the areas I crossed off was letting people know. It says letting residents know within a week. The way that this was written, you could have a permanent speed hump in your street, and you would just get a letter in the mail saying it's going to be here. To me, we need to just let's focus on the high school project and then kind of take the next step. So that's how I feel about it. So I can make the amendments next week on the floor, and I will vote to see if this can get brought out. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. And I will move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We will be adjourned at 7:19. Thank you.
I'd like to call the City Property and Claims Committee to order at 7:19. My committee members are myself, Councilor Blair, and Councilor Holmes, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 that are coming out, motions coming out this evening. From the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to declare surplus and available for disposition the following water meters from the Water Department. There are 200 of them, and they are used.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. On the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to accept the donation of $100 in restaurant gift cards from an anonymous donor. Outreach Case Manager Renee Benjour and Public Health Nurse Jackie O'Brien will offer these cards to individuals and families in need.
Second.
Okay, thank you. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Are there any questions or concerns? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That passes. On the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve the generous donation of a Jugs hockey machine with an estimated value of $1,485 from the Rebecca Lynn Whitefield Foundation to the Attleboro High School Field Hockey Program.
Second.
Thank you. Again, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and are there any questions, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, that motion passes. From the docket of August 22nd, 2019, I entertain a motion to declare surplus and available for disposition the following item from the treasurer's office, and somehow I'm missing it, but it is a filing cabinet with drawers. It was in good condition, and it needed paint. I can remember that from my memory. I will check with any other concerns. The office is too small for it. Any other concerns, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that also passes, and that is all the City Property and Claims Committee has at this time. I would like to request an adjournment at 7:21.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And we are adjourned at 7:21. Thank you.
President Cooper, do you want me to drive the budget committee?
Yes, sir.
Is Laura,
But, we'll just keep going right around.
Okay.
Yep.
I call the Traffic and Transportation and Traffic Committee to order at 7:22.
Second?
I have two motions and one other item to speak of. From the docket of September 3rd, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve the installation of a stop sign on Bliss at Bourne.
Second.
Thank you. So we did have residents of the neighborhood come and speak in front of the public hearing last week in support of the stop sign on Bliss at Bourne. I will state that the police chief did do a tour down there. He did not necessarily support this particular one. He felt it was more of a traffic calming measure as opposed to an actual need for the stop sign at that location. I spent quite a bit of time down in that location, and people absolutely come up Bliss and just keep right on going. So I think I personally, I understand the concerns of the police chief, however, but I personally would be in support of it, in support of that installation. Any questions or comments from anybody? So I'll move for a vote. I entertain all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Yay. Nay. And the motion passes. And, you know, if there are additional questions with regards to that, I'd far prefer to put that in front of the full council for a vote. From the docket of September 3rd, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve the installation of a stop sign on Bourne at South Main Street.
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, this one is very much supported. Bourne Street, if you haven't had a chance to visit down there, it actually goes between us and Seekonk. It's half the road. And it is, with Waze and other mapping software, it's sending people up Bourne instead of going straight down and then having them go up Oak Hill Avenue. So the police chief was very much in support of that. So any questions or concerns? And again, we did have residents of the neighborhood speak in affirmative at the public hearing last week about it. I move for a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Last week, there was a communication with regards to the South Attleboro train station, and it was referred to traffic and transportation with the hopes of writing a resolution. Did you get copies of the, Councilor? I believe everybody should have gotten a copy of that. I may have dropped the ball just a little bit. It probably would have been significantly helpful to have Mr. Hawkins come in front of us, because this is something that he's pushing up at the state level. I do have a resolution that has been prepared for the entire municipal council to sign in support of making changes and fixing the complete repairs down at the South Attleboro MBTA. So I would like to read the resolution as written into the record right tonight, and happy to take any suggestions on adding or withdrawing any information. A resolution of support. A resolution in support of the complete repairs to the South Attleboro MBTA station, whereas the South Attleboro train station, located at 1350 Newport Avenue, is an advantageous location with 4 off-ramps from Interstate 95 to Route 1A, whereas many constituents have expressed concern due to the dilapidated conditions of the overhead pedestrian walkway jeopardizing their safety, whereas the state has had recent discussion and approval for repairs and aesthetic improvements to South Attleboro train station, whereas the overhead pedestrian walkway has not been included in the plans for the improvements, even with the visible rust and holes in the stairs and supports, whereas the city of Attleboro is in the midst of finalizing several transactions resulting in growth opportunities, generating additional need for transportation alternatives, whereas members of our state delegation and Attleboro's executive body have expressed concern about the urgent nature of these repairs, whereas the MBTA and the state of Massachusetts would benefit from the increased ridership and environmental advantage with more riders than drivers, and whereas the need for a safe alternative to the downtown Attleboro train station when it is full. Now therefore, the municipal council hereby declares its support for the immediate need for complete repairs to the South Attleboro MBTA station, especially the overhead pedestrian walkway, which currently poses a safety risk for all users.
Second.
Thank you. This, of course, would be my intent. You know, I'm open to additions of anything that somebody would like to add to this. I also did have Virginia forward to you the newspaper articles and the TV and all of that, so we have some backup information with regards to this. So I would like to move this out of committee and make amendments on the floor next week.
So I would just say that, and you might remember this, Counselor, I have, in South Attleboro, and certainly I think you too, when we were earlier on the council, since Judy Robbins have been asking for this, since when George Ross was the representative, when Mayor Hero was the representative, and now here we are again, and we have been asking for this for a very, very long time, so this is nothing new. I would love it if we could get the support and it actually happens. I mean, how anybody uses that is beyond me. I mean, it's just dangerous down there, and it's been long overdue, and hopefully the transportation at the state level will finally do something.
One of the things that I did leave off is that President Cooper, myself, and you have already sent a letter in support, being a Ward 1 counselor, and this has been something that's been incredibly important to you for quite some time. So that has already been sent, but this is so that we can have the entire, it is my goal to have all 11 of us sign off on this.
Thank you.
President Cooper.
Thank you. I was just gonna say the thing about the letter that we sent. I know, based on some social media posts, that Representative Hawkins was doing some work either yesterday or today around this issue with the state, and has got some momentum, some traction, and some attention to the issue. I think the only thing to be added to the resolution would be that it is, that access is the only access to the northbound platform. There is no other way to get there other than to walk across the tracks. And I
To the
think-
northbound platform?
Yeah. There's no other way to get there.
Okay.
So, if it were, if it continues to deteriorate and is unsafe, then we have another problem on our hands. And there'll be a heck of a lot more people here trying to get the train.
Sure. I'll add that for next week.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Is there any other questions or concerns? Thank you. So I move for a vote to accept the resolution of support.
Aye.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. I call for an adjournment at 7:29.
Second.
And all those in favor? Aye. And we are adjourned at 7:29. Thank you.
License committee is canceled this evening. Business.
I'd like to call the Budget and Appropriations Committee to order at 7:30. On the committee is Councilor Delicio, myself, and Councilor Conti. We have one order of business on the docket tonight. From the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve the payment of previous year's school bills totaling $5,038.72 for the Attleboro Public Schools. The fiscal obligations were not received in time to be processed in the normal fiscal year 2019 business cycle.
Second.
This is, these are just additional bills that came in beyond beyond what was reasonable for them to be able to process it. It is for some wellness training, some special ed tutoring, and then there's a $49 expense report in there.
That happens every year.
Happens every year. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. That concludes the business. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned at 7:31. Next, call the Zoning and Land Use Committee to order at 7:31. On the committee is myself, Councilor Holmes, Councilor Delicio. We have two orders of business tonight. From the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve a grant of easement from Massachusetts Electric Company. The original grant of easement dated June 3rd, 1996 needs to be amended to relocate a portion for the construction of the new high school. The grant of easement is shown on a plan titled City of Attleboro, Massachusetts Easement Relocation Plan of Land, Rathburn Willard Drive and Brennan Way, comprised of two sheets, sheet EA1 and sheet EA2, prepared by Kesley Booz Associates Incorporated, 325 Foxborough Boulevard, Suite 100, Foxborough, Mass. The Samiotis Consultants, Inc., 20 A Street, Framingham, Mass., and dated September 6th, 2019.
Second.
Right. So this is to move the electrical for the high school to follow the new path of Rathburn Willard Drive. If it stayed where it was, it would be where they're planning to build the new school. So they need to move it following the roadway and coming in along the front side of the building. This has been reviewed by the solicitor. The solicitor's okay with the legal language of it. And in my opinion, the plan makes sense. President Cooper.
I just want to remind everybody that after the special meeting, when we vote this, there's a Mylar back there that needs to be signed so it can be recorded. So please make sure you sign the Mylar before you leave. Otherwise, Virginia will be calling you to ask you to come in and do it. Thank you.
So this sounds pretty straightforward. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Second item, from the docket of September 17th, 2019, I entertain a motion to accept the grant of easement from Bay State Gas Company, DBA Columbia Gas, of Massachusetts for property designated on the City Assessor's Map 43, Lot 234 and Lot 280 for the purpose of pipeline replacement at Cape Park Zoo located at 201 County Street, Attleboro.
Second.
All right. So this one, we're only going to vote out of committee tonight. We're not going to vote this one before the full council. But this is for routine replacement of the gas lines going into Caper Park, as well as extending them out to reach a few additional zoo exhibits. Any other questions, comments? It's been reviewed by the solicitor. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. That concludes the business. Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned at 7:34.
I'd like to call the Capital Improvement City Development Committee to order at 7:35. Sitting on this committee is Councilor Dolan and Councilor Waterman. I have one motion for the evening. From the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to transfer $50 from account 11231-000-578300, Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account 11211-000-3753-010 Mayor Membership for an increase in MA PPO membership fees, which is for the purchasing department.
Second.
So the MAPPO is the Massachusetts Association of Professional Purchasing Officials, Massachusetts Association of Public Purchasing Officials. And the membership is for Gail Clark, who is our Capital Projects Administrator. And she has an associate membership that's $100, which went up from $50 from the prior years. And that's currently common among the county associations and state associations as costs for meetings have risen. And I would recommend the passage. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. That concludes the business I have to bring before you this evening. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion's in order. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I declare the Capital Improvement City Development Committee adjourned at 7:37.
All right, I call the Personnel and Human Services Committee to order at 7:36. From the docket of October 1st, 2019, I would entertain a motion to approve the confirmation of Mary Flaherty, 358 South Main Street, Attleboro, to fill a 3-year term on the Disability Commission, term to expire February 2022.
Second.
Thank you. I have known Mary for a couple of years now. She's very very hardworking. She's a really sound person. She's been attending a lot of the Council on Disability meetings as an observer. So she's up on what they're doing. Her skills are quite wide-ranging. She's excellent artistic skills. She's been in data entry. She's got great computer skills. I'm very impressed by her. I think she'll be a wonderful and dedicated member of the Council on Disabilities. Is there anybody else who would like to ask any questions, discussion? Okay, can we call for a vote now? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and I say aye. And that passes. Also, from the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve the confirmation of Verity Preston, 121 West Street, Attleboro, to fill an expired term in the Attleboro Youth Commission, term to expire February 2021. I have not yet been able to meet Verity, but I have left a message and asked them to call me back. I'm assuming that she's still interested, so I would suggest that we go forward and we nominate her. Questions?
Thank you. So I'm sure you'll hear back from the Prestons. Her sister is on the Attleboro Youth Commission and was the first person to be able to answer my question to describe photosynthesis. Here, I've always asked them when they've come before us a question, and I deliberately asked the same one, and clearly she did her homework and knew what the council was going to ask, and when I asked it, she was prepared and she ripped it right, hit it right out of the park. So when her sister comes, be prepared, because the question hasn't been asked yet, because we haven't had some, so it'll be a different question, so the pressure will be slightly different. But honestly, it's a great family. They do a lot of community things. I have absolutely zero hesitation in putting this before the council, and when you can arrange for Verity to come before the council, that's fine. They do great work, and as much help as they can get on the youth commission, I know should be an active member of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. I have invited her for next week, as I have also invited Mary Flaherty, who could not come tonight. So hopefully next week.
Following.
The following week?
Yeah, because next week is a full council meeting.
Okay.
So you'll
2
need
weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I say aye too. And that passes. And I would now move to adjourn.
Second.
And we adjourn at 7:40. Oh, didn't do all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. 7:40.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Public Works Committee to order at 7:40 PM. And I have 3 motions to bring before you this evening from the docket of October 1st, 2019. I entertain a motion to approve the request of Massachusetts Electric Company and Verizon for a pole relocation at Drummond Street, pole 3, to move 5 feet south of the current location.
Second?
Thank you. So, we've had a lot of polls come before us in the last, I don't know, it's been a couple months, I think. It actually has been quite more than that. You'd think the company with all the power would have it all together, and they'd send us all these relocations and new pole requests all at once, because they have engineers that go out and they look at how the new high school is going to be built, the whole plan, and they go through all this stuff. But no, they haven't done it that way. They're sending it to us like once a week or once every other week. And come to find out, before they'll move any of these poles, this is why we're having the special meeting this evening, before they'll move any of the poles or add any poles right now to that area and get that project going, which we want it to go fast, we have to approve all the pole relocations, all the new poles, before they will even get going. Yep, so the reason that we're having this special meeting this evening is because this just came in last week. We've had the other poles come in over the last several months to relocate them, or for the new ones, and it's all for the same project, but they just don't get their act together. So that's why we're bringing this forward this evening. Any comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. From the docket of October 1st, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve the request of the Department of Public Works to pay 2 fiscal year 19 invoices to Aggregate Industries in the amount of $195.87 from Chapter 90 funds and $454.19 from the deficit snow spending.
Second.
Thank you. So there's this thing, it's called the escalation clause. So every time, all municipalities have to include a price adjustment, because diesel fuel, concrete, liquid asphalt, whenever they have a project like that, they have to add this little clause in there to protect the contractor, because the fluctuation of the prices every month it changes, and it's posted on their website, the changes. So unfortunately, this didn't catch up to them until recently, and they also, Michael Tyler was telling me that Aggregate Industries is getting together with another company. So he said he thinks it maybe got behind on that as well, but he did send a letter off to them asking them if they could keep it within the same fiscal year, the way that we run, so that our funds don't get all messed up from 20 to 19. Any comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. From the docket of September 17th, 2019, I entertain a motion to approve the request from National Grid and Verizon to install a new pole 65 feet from pole 316 to provide electric service for a city storage yard on Pond Street between Reed Street and Central Avenue.
Second?
Thank you. We did have a public hearing last week. There was nobody here to speak in favor, and nobody here to speak against. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you ever so kindly. I would ask for an adjournment at 7:44.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Motion signed from Kate. I can give you a copy. Okay. Kate, do you need a copy?
Nope, I have one. Thank you.
Do you have one signed?
Right there.
Oh, you already did. Steps ahead, as always.
I tried.
All right. But I saw you had last week. I was watching you.
Well, of course I use the cheat sheet.
Thank you. Call this special meeting of the Municipal Council to order at 7:45. Please stand and join me in a salute to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Withers. Would you kindly read the notice of the special meeting?
September 20th, 2019, to the members of the Municipal Council from Mark J. Cooper, Council President. Councilors, by authority of Article 2, Section 2-7C of the Attleboro Home Rule Charter, I hereby call a special meeting of the Municipal Council as follows. Date, Tuesday, September 24th, 2019. Time, 7 p.m. Place, Council Chambers. Purpose, pole location for new high school project. CC, Mayor Paul Heroux.
Thank you. There are two committees reporting this evening, and the first I will recognize Council Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reporting for Public Works Committee from the docket of September 17th, 2019. I move to approve the request from National Grid and Verizon to install a new pole 65 feet from pole 316 to provide electric service for a city storage yard on Pond Street between Reed Street and Central Avenue.
Second?
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion's in order. Any additional comments from 2 minutes ago?
No, thank you.
Thank you. A voice vote is required. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. From the docket of October 1st, 2019, I move to approve the request of Massachusetts Electric Company and Verizon for a pole relocation at Drummond Street, pole 3, to move 5 feet south of the current location.
Second?
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion's in order. Any additional comments?
None. Thank you.
Thank you. Any from the council? Seeing none, a voice vote is required. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
Concludes the business for the Public Works Committee this evening, but I would like to call for a committee meeting at the appropriate time next week.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Kovas.
Reporting for the Zoning and Land Use Committee from the docket of October 1st, 2019. I move to approve a grant of easement from Massachusetts Electric Company. The original grant of easement dated June 3rd, 1996 needs to be amended to relocate a portion for the construction of the new high school. The grant of easement is shown on a plan entitled City of Attleboro, Massachusetts Easement Relocation Plan of Land, Rathburn Willard Drive in Brennan Way, comprised of 2 sheets, sheet EA1 and sheet EA2, prepared by Kessley Booz Associates, Inc., 325 Foxborough Boulevard, Suite 100, Foxborough, Mass., and Sabiotes Consultants, Inc., 20A Street, Framingham, Mass., and dated September 6, 2019.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any questions or comments?
We just discussed this. Don't forget to sign the Mylar.
That's right. Any other questions from the council? Seeing none, a roll call vote is required, and we'll begin with Council Jackson.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Mr. Cobus?
Yes.
Vice President Parika?
Yes.
Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds? Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
President Cooper?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. There is no other business for the council this evening. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
That concludes the business of the zoning land use committee. Call for committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Now, there is no additional business before the council this evening. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned 7:49. Thank you.
Thank you.